Hey, Happy New Year to all of you. When I interacted with a lot of young software engineers who are probably in the final year of engineering or who are new and have like couple of years of experience, and they've been asking like what are the things specifically which I need to prepare for when I face interviews of of the software companies, and what are they really looking for in an interview. So since many people have posted me, I actually created a interview for preparing for the senior managers, like senior engineering managers and directors, which was well received. A lot of people gave me a lot of positive feedback, but I am also getting a lot of questions on people with lesser experience. What should they really work on? So I thought why not make a brief video on that to just give an idea of what should you focus on, because I've conducted many campus interviews and also interviewed people with all the different experience levels. And so if you look at the entry level engineers, many of the companies, what they're looking at is, what do they have a problem solving skill? What does that really mean? If they're given a problem which probably they've never seen so far, right? What is going to be and that could be an ambiguous problem also. It may not be fully well defined, right? How is their approach going to be? So, which basically means, are you able to understand the question which is asked? Are you able to ask the right questions back to the interviewer? Because very often the questions which are asked may not be complete. So you may have to ask further questions on that. So how do you kind of understand the definition of the problem and arrive at an agreement with the interviewer? What is the expectation from you? So when you're getting a problem statement, first thing is, don't panic, for one. Second is, don't jump and start writing code. That is not what the expectation is. Because very often intentionally the problem statements are given which are incomplete or has some gaps, and we are checking whether the engineer is able to understand that and ask the right questions to you know, resolve those gaps to really come up with a concrete, clear, clean description of the problem. Now there could be functional aspects or non-functional aspects. A simple thing like, if the question is, you know, please, you need to write a framework to figure out the clicks, to kind of understand the number of clicks which are going on, and able to analyze those clicks. Say if that is the question, then there are so many open questions which are possible, right? For example, is this just limited to a particular location? What is the click rate? What is the number of users that you're talking? There's so many things which probably are open here. So you need to kind of, I just gave an example. Maybe the problem could be far more smaller, or it may be a little more bigger. So it all depends on the level at which you're being interviewed. But you should never shy away from asking those questions to clarify, so that you're very clear on what is expected out of you as a part of the interview. That's the first thing, right? The second thing is, once you understand the problem, right, you are trying to come up with an approach. One of the most important thing which you have to do is, you need to talk through that approach. It's not that I get a problem and say, to tell the interviewer, give me 5 minutes, let me think about it. The interviewer wants to know, how are you thinking about it also? What is your approach? What are the various things that you're considering, right? and what are the various aspects in the design. For example, you're defining an API, a function, right? What are the various considerations for that function that you're looking at? So you then, what's the kind of algorithm that you're looking at? Why are you looking at that algorithm? For probably it is because the order of the algorithm, time complexity is lesser, or space complexity, it's more efficient in space complexity. There could be various reasons. Or you're using a combination of algorithms, combination of data structures. So it's always better to talk through your approach before you jump into the coding. The reason is because, and then write down, for example, the API. What's the kind of API that you're going to go for? Or the class, maybe you're defining a class with multiple methods. There could be private methods, public methods, right? So define the skeletal structure of what you're planning to fill up. And then after that, while you code, once you code, try to kind of walk through that code with the interviewer, saying, this is what the input to the function is, and then this is what the function will do, and walk through that. And usually what the best way of walking through is also consider the test cases. How do you say that whatever that you've written, the code, it is really working as per expectation? For that, so all this I'm telling is because the interviewer is trying to check whether what is your fit for that organization, fit for the industry. Because you're not writing code for like the way you used to write it in college. In college, you're writing code to make something work. Here, you're writing code where that's going to be part of a product, going to be used by millions of users. There's a huge difference there. So it's always better to consider the test cases. What are the various test cases that you should consider to pass, and then walk through the code and see each test case is it going to go through. The other important aspect is in these test cases, you need to also consider all the various boundary conditions. You should never miss out boundary condition, because often that one boundary condition missed out makes the whole code useless, right? So always think about the boundary conditions. And then the other aspect which is very important is, are you structuring the code well, or is it like messed up? You're naming your variables in a random way, your helper functions are all some foo and all that stuff. Don't do all that you see in your textbooks. Try to define proper names, make it very readable code. And are you doing all the error processing? Don't write huge functions. Try to modularize the code if that is necessary. If there are assumptions that you're making, please tell the assumptions to the interview. I am assuming these things. Are you okay with it? It's always better to tell that when you're defining the problem statement, that there are certain assumptions. Now, once you have this part figured out, and then as you walk through the code, you should also say, what is the time complexity of this? What is the space complexity of this algorithm? And you should always understand, it's not necessary that the first attempt that you make, you're going to come up with the most optimal approach. First is to come up with an approach so that it works and it satisfies, and then you can attempt to improve on it. Oh, you can say, here, I've used an array. Maybe if I use a hash table, the time complexity may come down, right? If I am using a balanced tree, an AVL tree, probably my space complexity may come down. So there could be various things that you can start. See, the good thing is, once you write your the first iteration, you understood the problem really well and you have some solution in place. That itself gives you a certain level of confidence and some level of happiness that, okay, I've got something in place, some solution in place. Now you can take time to see how you can improve. So even that, you talk through that. Say, oh, here I feel that the time complexity is n squared, doesn't look to be that good. So can I do this and make it n log n, right? So talk through what do you think that you can do to improve the time complexity. So the talking through part is very, very important. If you don't talk through, the other aspect is the interviewer often will give you hints. It is very, very important, and that's all. For example, I being in Google, we really watch when we give the hints. We are just trying to see, is the engineer able to understand the hint, understand what is the problem and why the hint is given, able to kind of take that hint and immediately apply that into the solution, right? So the hint is given with a purpose. So always those hints which are given by the interviewers should be taken seriously, and you need to see how you can apply those hints, and that may improve your code or all over code, right? So these are some of the important tips that I want to give you. And once you have done with the code, now sometimes what happens is in Google, when we do the interviews, you first may give a warm up question just to make the engineer comfortable, right? And that will be a fairly simple question. And then you go to the next level of difficulty. I don't want to get into the type of questions asked and all. There are enough materials which are available. There are so many websites and all that where so many of this kind of questions are discussed and so on, right? And typically the questions asked are just to check whether you have good understanding of computer science, conceptual knowledge on things like data structures and algorithms. Are you able to think through aspects of performance, memory usage? So what you're testing is fundamental. So there's no magic which is expected, right? So but very clear understanding of concepts, operating system concepts on data structures and algorithms, parallelism like concurrency, right? And aspects of where to use concurrency, what's the kind of data structure to be used where, right? Then how do you define good APIs? How do you write clean code which doesn't have errors, which is well structured, which is readable? All these are very important aspects. So please understand, the idea is not to just write some code and make it work. That is only going to make somebody half satisfied. If you have to make somebody fully satisfied, you should be able to write clean code, justify your code by walking through and explain all the test cases and say why it will work, and try to see how you can further optimize it. Because some cases, yeah, you may end up with a real optimal solution in the beginning, but it's not always necessary. Initially, it may be a brute force approach, and then you can start iterating. And it's not necessary in all cases the iteration will end up with the most optimal code. That's okay, right? That's okay. So based on the complexity of the question, sometimes we don't expect that the most optimal code is written, because that much time may not be there in the interview. But one thing which I see many people missing out is they get the question and they jump and start writing code. Don't do that. Try to spend at least 5 minutes, understand the problem, discuss with the interviewer, be very clear on what is the expectation in the problem statement, and then talk through what is going to be your approach to the problem. Define the API and say why you define the API that way, and then start writing the code. It may not be one single function. In case sometimes it may be a class with multiple methods, or it could be multiple functions, and all this is possible, right? And definitely consider aspects of performance, optimization, space complexity, and how your code takes care of error handling, exception handling or error handling, based on the language that you're using. And also always try to further optimize your problem. And the most important thing is you need to keep your cool. Now, the way you can prepare this, so I see many engineers use various websites like LeetCode and all that stuff. That's all good. Of course, you kind of get to see different problem statements, but also rehearse yourself a few times, right? Like, how do you handle this problem in an interview? How do you communicate with the interviewer, right? How do you ask the right questions? How do you approach with writing the code? Try to rehearse it a few times, like a mock kind of interviews, because that is very important, because that helps you to keep you cool and will bring a structure in the way you are responding to a question asked in the interview. So these are some of the tips which I have. I was actually planning to make a more structured video, but sadly I couldn't get time. So I thought, let me start with at least a small video giving these tips. And soon will come with a more detailed video. But I hope this will help all of you. Thank you so much. Once again, wishing all of you a wonderful year 2025. Let this year bring all you and your families a lot of happiness, good health, and prosperity. Till my next video, bye bye.